Suddenly, this group was primed and ready to take part in politics. How did it happen? Growth, and some powerfully invested people pulling the strings. In this episode of Lectual Does the 70s, we'll be discussing how the decade became the debutante ball, or coming out, of the new right.
There are 10 cities in the Southwest of over 100,000 population.
This is the Sunbelt, and it was first coined by the same man, Kevin Phillips, who wrote the book In the Emerging Republican Majority. Phillips was the one who studied the trends and attitude of the South, noticing that white Democrats fleeing the party in the wake of civil rights would make excellent members of the changing Republican Party, and that they had a lot in common with disgruntled white voters in the Southwest and suburbs. But it wasn't just factories and agriculture bringing new wealth and influence to the Sunbelt. Aerospace and defense industries built headquarters in Sunbelt locations like LA, Houston, Las Vegas, Atlanta, and North Carolina. Isn't it funny how many Southerners are supposedly anti-government and self-reliant, but much of the South's late 20th century growth came from federal programs and, dare I say it, handouts? The South's lack of unions, along with its job growth, meant union decline in the North and Midwest. This coincided perfectly with the growth in service industry jobs like fast food and retail, where any potential for new union organizing was weak. Baseball, long America's favorite pastime, was symbolically and historically attached to urban areas. There were only 3 major teams in the South, while the National Football League had 6 teams in the South. The Dallas Cowboys would become America's team, and the coach, Tom Landry, became an American hero and Sunbelt symbol. In 1979, it was reported that Dallas Cowboy games were broadcasted by CBS more than any other team, which might have been linked to this iconic poster of the grossly underpaid Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. It sold around 1 million copies when it was released in 1977. Another influence shipped nationwide from the South was country music. This bit of Southern cultural nationalism was exhibited through groups like Lynyrd Skynyrd and hits like Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter and John Denver's Thank God I'm a Country Boy. The culture that came along with country music, aka redneck culture, pickup trucks, cowboy boots and hats, the Confederate flag, became trendy to Northerners and Midwesterners who had never ventured below the Mason-Dixon. Redneck, once an epithet for poor landless white Southerners, became a source of pride and working-class patriotism in which even Northerners and Midwesterners could share Southern sentiments about survival, government interference, liberals, and welfare-loving Negroes. In 1971, a confidential memo titled The Attack on American Free Enterprise System was published by Lewis F. Powell and would serve as a rallying cry for the ultra-wealthy Americans who felt threatened by the rising interest in radical politics, consumer prioritization, and corporate regulations that had emerged in the 60s. In 1973, the Heritage Foundation was founded by Paul Weyrich and Edwin Follner Jr. The Heritage Foundation published materials and held conferences on pro-business and anti-government stances and provided advice and assistance to Capitol Hill politicians. The Heritage Foundation was soon joined by others like the American Enterprise Institute, the Hoover Institution, and the Cato Institute. Weyrich also founded the American Legislation Exchange Council, a group that initiated legislative fights surrounding conservative issues in every state. Most of the lobby group's financial support came from the billionaire oil tycoon Richard Mellon Scaife. On Capitol Hill, lobbying groups funded by ultra-rich conservatives like Scaife and later the Kochs were joined by corporations hoping to end New Deal infrastructure and the expansion of workplace and environmental regulations. But these groups were not the people. No, the people, the folks who made up the silent majority and who were terrified of the increasingly secular and equal society, needed to be mobilized. This is how the ultra-rich could sway politics and save money at the same time, mobilizing and educating the group of Americans who best suited the job: religious fundamentalists. First, the new right needed to identify single-issue voter groups and unite them against a common enemy. These single-issue voters were Stop ERA housewives and mothers, the NRA gun toters, anti-abortion Catholics, anti-busing racists, etc. Next, there needed to be multi-issue, broad-spectrum conservative organizations who served a number of functions despite having less mainstream appeal. The third key to success were new forms of communication, namely direct mail. As Vigory and Associates believed the media was controlled by liberals, girls, they wanted to go around mainstream media to directly reach their audience. The fourth key for the new right was an emphasis on coalition politics. Vigory, Wayrich, and others saw that they had common threats and needed to work together to defeat them and achieve their goals. Evangelicals actually left their mark on the sexual revolution in their own way. A lot of sex advice literature was produced by and for evangelical women in the 70s, a part of a larger evangelical publishing boom. According to Frances Fitzgerald, evangelical women published a spate of books arguing that women were by nature different from men and could achieve fulfillment and true femininity only by surrendering their lives to their husbands. Part of surrendering meant being really skilled at sex. Anita Bryant quipped in a 1972 book, "Christian sex is everything. Married sex, as with all else God has created, is beautiful." No-fault divorce laws were more numerous and divorce rates climbed. Single women were out in the workplace. Casual sex was becoming more accepted. In the face of all of this, evangelical messaging towards women about sex became a lot more encouraging and permissive. Beverly and Tim LaHaye wrote a 1976 bestseller that emphasized that the ultimate objective of sex is orgasm for both the husband and wife. A key feature of these books was the looming threat of homewreckers, a fear intensified by the rise of women in the workplace. Beverly LaHaye wrote that men's secretaries were desperately lonely and will pay any price for a period of tenderness. Texts like Maribel Morgan's 1974 bestseller, The Total Woman, told women to prepare for sexual intercourse every night for a week, reminding them that all day long your husband is surrounded at the office by dazzling secretaries who emit clouds of perfume. The assignments were, of course, sexual acts, lots of new positions, indulging your husband's sexual fantasies, and not being scared to try things, and naughty activities like donning lingerie. Isn't it pretty ironic that these evangelical texts encourage women to have sex with their husbands in exchange for gifts, money, and ultimately security? I think there's a word for that. Evangelical sex writers also emphasized that men were stressed out at their jobs, just a healthy feature of capitalism, and that it was the wife's duty to provide sexual comfort. At the end of a long day, your husband especially needs your compliments. Put your husband's tattered ego back together again. He needs to be pampered, loved, and restored through food and sex. After all, in the 70s, good Christian women were competing with more readily available porn, and